What's up, YouTube? It's Randip and Dan for another video. And yes, it's 1 week into the NHL season, and people are freaking out in different markets across the NHL. Reach, are we ready to overreact a little bit?
I'm always ready to overreact. You know me. I got a couple of spros in me, and the takes just really get hot.
All right, you tell me if this is an overreaction. Based on the start to this year, no more than 2 Canadian teams will make the postseason based on some of the starts we've seen from Canadian teams this year.
You know, I had 4 teams from Canada making it to the postseason, but this is not necessarily an overreaction because I'll say this. Look, Toronto and Edmonton, for consensus purposes, were most people's playoff teams from Canada. Everybody else, very thin margins that they are playing on. So not an overreaction for me on this. Slow starts for Montreal, Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver all raise concerns for me. And if you're really going to look at which one is most alarming, it's Montreal, and it's with a bullet. It's undebatable. They've been awful. And yeah, you were a cup finalist last year, but this season so far, losing 5-0 to the Sharks, that is inexcusable. And the biggest red flag, Nick Suzuki hasn't performed pretty much at all just yet. His metrics are not great. You look at his scoring chances, he's not generating much. That's the top line. Toffoli, Suzuki, Caulfield, they've been ghosts out there from an offensive perspective, and it's really highlighting how much Philip Deneau meant to that team.
And that's a huge point there, because what did he do? Maybe he wasn't the biggest point producer, but he did shelter Nick Suzuki to a certain extent. He could take those tougher matchups as well. And Suzuki trends to be a very good defensive center. I know the comparisons to Patrice Bergeron or that style of centerman, maybe not to that level, but they've been out there. But it's a quick transition when you go from option 1A, 1B to all of a sudden being option 1 with a bullet. And I think Montreal, it's been shocker, right? 3 goals this season. It's been ugly. I think if you look at, some of their play and losing to the teams that they have, there's a lot of turnover on that roster, but that's shocking. The team, okay, 2 teams, I'm confident with my picks that the Canucks and Winnipeg Jets will be back in the mix. But from the Canucks perspective, 0 regulation wins in 4 games in which you played Detroit and Buffalo. It's not a great look. You lost both of those games outright in regulation, not picking up points. I think the long game, I'm not too worried about the Canucks. The Winnipeg Jets, however, I'm high on them, and I still remain high on them.
Randeep, they were your big team.
They still are. They still are.
Our Central Division preview, you were all in on the Jets.
I'm not buckling from my pick yet, but that defense in Minnesota game especially, and just overall this season, has not been good. And we talked about how this defense would, transition into being a much better, unit as they added Nate Schmidt. They added Brendan Dillon. Connor Hellebuyck was left on an island in that game, especially against Minnesota. So one thing that concerns me about the Winnipeg Jets is we expect them to be a better defensive team. But early on this year, they're not picking up those wins. And that Minnesota game where they surrendered a lead and they looked bad defensively, that was a bit of a red flag in the sense to say, okay, this transition to being a better defensive team is not going to come immediately. Connor Hellebuyck might still have some difficult nights.
Yeah, per natural stat trick, they have the worst high danger scoring chance differential in the league so far this season. Early days, but that's a continuation of what we've seen in Winnipeg over the last couple of years. And look, I didn't have Calgary making the playoffs to begin with. I know they've only played a couple of games, but where are they getting goals from? I think it's still a major question mark for them. And I haven't seen any answers come in the first couple of games for the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, shots are great. You can put up 40 plus in a couple of games, but we know how this works, right? If you don't get those high quality chances, if you don't get those high danger chances, and yes, Mike Smith in that opener for them was really good, but that was also score effects. When they fell behind in that game, that's when they really ramped it up. So they were chasing the game. So it's not about how many shots you get on net necessarily. It's about when they come in and how much are you trailing in that game. So to me, I was never all that high in Calgary. I know fans in Calgary didn't appreciate me in the comments, but don't like them to score in many games, to be quite honest with you.
So let's move on and look a little bit south of the border. Alexander Ovechkin, already 4 goals on the season. Ovechkin will reach 50 goals for the 9th time in his career. Overreaction or not?
Okay, I know this sounds ridiculous because he is older, but it's Alexander Ovechkin. How can you bet against Alexander Ovechkin? To me, it's kind of like betting against Tom Brady. You do it at your own peril. At some point, you just have to say, until you stop doing these things, until you stop being incredible, I'm just going to bet for you because it's a great story. And if he stays healthy, I know there's a scare at the beginning of the season of, is he going into the season healthy? What did we see? First game, picks up 4 points, scores a couple of goals. Alex is good to go. I'm willing to make that bet. It's a bold one, but Alexander Ovechkin does these sort of things. It's not an overreaction. Give me 50, maybe because I want to see it, but he's also capable. Come on now.
Yeah, the 2019-20 season, which was of course put on pause because of the pandemic. Obi had what, 48 goals, I think, in 69-ish games. So, he was on pace to have 50 in the last full season that we've had in the NHL. But I'm a little bit concerned, and it's not a major concern because we know he's always done a lot of damage with the extra man and on the power play. But so far this season, he's got just 3 shots at 5-on-5. That's the one area I think if you're going to bet against him getting to 50, you're going to need to see more production at 5-on-5 from Alexander Ovechkin than we saw last year and certainly early on this season. Of course, still very much early days, but it's hard to bet against Alexander Ovechkin, as you mentioned.
Come on, it's a great story. We all want to see it. Even the great one himself wants to see that story kind of develop and beat his own record. So I'm for that story. All right, moving on though. Let's go to Washington's arch rivals, Pittsburgh. We all expected that they would start off the season. They're missing some key players. They're missing superstars.
Yeah.
But what's going on? Pittsburgh keeps on winning. And
They've-
overreaction or not, Reach,
Yeah.
Pittsburgh is going to be fine without Sid and Gino.
Without Sid and Gino, it looks like they're going to be fine. I mean, I don't know what Mike Sullivan puts in their cereal in the morning over there in Pittsburgh, but like they just find guys out of nowhere. Like good BC boy Danton Heinen is off to an incredible start. They lead the league in goals scored through the first 4 games, which nobody, certainly I wouldn't have bet on. I know a lot of those goals came on opening night, but this is still a team that Mike Sullivan has, even over the last couple of years, found a way to get the most out of talent you wouldn't on most nights bet against other teams in the NHL. But he's continued to do that. Sidney Crosby, when he gets back in the lineup, we know he's still a top 5 player in the league. Gino Malkin, his consistency has fallen off in the last couple of years, but even at the high end, we know Gino can still play really, really well, and he's in a contract year on top of that. So when he comes back, if this team is in a playoff spot, when both of those guys get back into the lineup, who's betting against them staying in that spot?
Yeah, the biggest reason you would knock them is that their top 2 stars weren't in the lineup for some, a serious amount of time, especially on Gino and Malkin. All of a sudden, if they tread water, and they're clearly doing more than that right now, you're in a very, very good situation. Credit should go to Mike Sullivan because even that year, they won that first Stanley Cup. There was a lot of turmoil on that club. He rights the situation. They end up winning back-to-back Stanley Cups. But as we've seen, whenever there's injuries, even going back to last year, there was a shout for Coach of the Year contemplation and at least consideration. He continues to find a way to get it done. But also, Ron Hextall was in an interesting situation walking into that job. They could have just said, all right, we're bringing in all the veterans. We're selling, the futures. We're not going to go young. They decided to go a little bit different. They tried to invest in players like Teddy Bluger and having maybe those mid-career players and younger players that you want to tap into and maybe take a chance on, like you said, Danton Heinen. So I think Sullivan deserves some credit, but Ron Hextall also made some interesting bets that weren't popular at the time that are paying off thus far. So Pittsburgh, I was low on them in the preseason because of those injuries. Might have to change that tune a little bit. All right, we got to move to Chicago, though. And this is a train wreck happening right now. Overreaction or not, Jeremy Colleton will be the first head coach fired this season.
This is not an overreaction. Chicago made a bunch of moves in the offseason with an eye towards getting back to the playoffs and trying to maximize the final 2 years of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves' careers. With all that said, that means pressure is on, the seat is hot right from the get go. And when you start as badly as they have, you don't have a lot of room for error. And yeah, sure, a lot of the numbers suggest that Chicago has been a little bit unlucky, that they'll have some positive regression in the days ahead. But are they going to be allowed that time if things don't smooth out rather quickly here? I mean, the analytics crowd talked about how Seth Jones is not nearly the player everyone says he is and really hammered against that contract. What have you seen early on that suggests they were wrong about that? Seth Jones has been on the ice for 5 goals against, none for at 5-on-5. It's been awful. And they are the worst team at 5-on-5 so far this season with their goal differentials. This is really alarming. And yeah, I'm not calling for a coach this early in the season, but the heat is on in Chicago if they don't turn things around quickly.
No, and listen, it's justifiably so. They've looked bad. They've been outscored 15-2 5-on-5 this year, which is brutal. Like, it's bad. And
Yeah.
beyond that, there's scratching Strome, which is one of their better centermen. That's a situation where you're
Yeah,
looking
guy who
at,
can actually generate some offense.
and exactly that, you're not endearing yourself to the fan base, and you're definitely not endearing yourself to that locker room as well. If you're essentially, scratching one of your better offense generating players. The other thing is, Seth Jones, and I know that's a shot at me because I was standing for him earlier. The jury is still out on that one. Don't worry. I have faith in Seth Jones.
He's going to be better, but it's been a really tough start.
It has. But the one thing we can't really look past either, and when you talk about those goals scored with him on the ice, Marc-Andre Fleury hasn't been good either, right?
Yeah.
Like, from top to bottom, this team has not been good, and that starts with the coach as well. He hasn't exactly endeared himself to that public. So this is a big week. Seth Jones, after the most recent loss, said this, must-win games. We're talking about before the end of October, and this team is already talking about must-win games. It's a rough situation in Chicago. I don't think this is overreaction. Remember, this is the organization that fired Denny Savard after 4 games.
Yeah.
They've done it before.
Yeah. And look, you got to start getting some wins. Period. End of story. I'll say this, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves, Taves has come back and I thought he's looked mostly fine, and some of the underlying numbers do say he's been pretty good actually. So some things are going to start turning for Chicago. The question is, when do they start turning for them?
Yeah, being unlucky is one thing. Being outscored 5-on-5, 15-2, that's more than luck, folks. That's bad hockey as well. Hit us up with what you think about these overreactions. Are they overreactions? Are they not? Come with yours as well in the comments. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. We will catch you in the next video. See you later.